Hello and thanks for joining us on Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman. Paris Schutz will join us later in the program. Here's what we're looking at. A federal judge rules a Chicago alderman violated the First Amendment. We share the details.
You deserve the significant raise.
A presidential first. Joe Biden joins auto workers on the picket line. A look at the local impact of the strike.
You have arrived.
I feel it. That's so cool. Oh, it's sticky.
And exploring the natural world with the host of PBS's America Outdoors. And now to some of today's top stories. The Republican-led U.S. House Judiciary Committee held a hearing in Chicago today on the subject of violent crime. The hearing was led by House Judiciary Leader Jim Jordan, aiming to call to light Democratic big city policies that he sees as exacerbating crime. The committee heard from victims of violent crime. Jordan took issue with what he calls soft prosecutors, citing Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx in the recently passed Safety Act that does away with cash bail.
By downplaying surging crime and denying victims justice, the leaders of this city are failing their citizens. I mean, you stop and think about it. First, it was defund the police, the former mayor. Then it's this Safety Act, and then it's a prosecutor who won't prosecute the bad guys.
Supporters of the Safety Act have touted that cash bail kept people, oftentimes low-level offenders, locked up based on what they could afford, and that the current system will hold the most violent offenders in jail before trial without any option for bail. Neighbors and community groups in Lawndale are calling for more accountability after the assault of an 11-year-old girl. The groups are calling on police to step up their investigation into who assaulted 11-year-old Trinity Washington during a Mexican Independence Day celebration last week. Chicago police say they're investigating but have no one in custody. The offenders allegedly used a racial slur against Washington and her family. Washington's mother says her daughter has undergone multiple surgeries since the incident. Trinity Washington spoke out today about the trauma she's experienced.
All I wanted to do was be with my family, not have to go through surgery to surgery to surgery. And to see my family go through this is so hard right now.
Humboldt Park community leaders have announced a public meeting to decide the fate of a controversial building going up in the park. The National Museum of Puerto Rican Arts and Culture started construction last year on a non-permitted structure attached to the landmark receptory building and stable. Preservationists and park activists have called on the museum to take the building down, and a lawsuit against the organization from the city is pending. The community meeting will take place on October 3rd and address the project's status and explore future possibilities for the structure. You can read more on this story from Patty Wetley on our website, WTTW.com/news. Up next, Paris Schutz and the latest legal trouble facing a Northwest Side alderperson right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A Chicago City Council member is in hot water over the First Amendment. A federal judge has ruled Alderman Jim Gardner violated the First Amendment when he blocked 6 critics from his official Facebook page in 2021. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more on the latest legal trouble facing the far Northwest Side alderperson. Heather, so tell us what prompted these 6 residents of the 45th Ward to sue Alderman Gardner back in 2021.
Well, they took great delight in blasting Alderman Gardner and accusing him of acting improperly on his Facebook page. And soon enough, they found those comments either hidden, deleted, and eventually they were all blocked. Even though the Chicago Board of Ethics had warned aldermen not to do that on their official Facebook page that they use to communicate with constituents about city news. So these 6 residents sued Alderman Gardner in federal court, and a judge ruled in their favor yesterday.
Right, because it's not his personal Facebook page, it's
Correct.
a public Facebook page, and he can't do that. So even before the case went to trial, the judge ruled, as you said, it violates the First Amendment. Why? What did he do to violate the Constitution?
Well, U.S. District Court Judge Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman found that Alderman Gardner discriminated against these posters because of who they were, opponents to him politically, and on what they said. And the First Amendment does not allow government officials to discriminate based on the content of speech or who it's coming from. Alderman Gardner didn't really put up much of a defense in filings in the case. He did argue that he was allowed to do it, and that if he did do it, he was protected by qualified immunity. Both defenses the judge dismissed.
And you reached out to Alderman Gardner. He declined to speak with you. What happened?
Well, I sent him a text message, and then he called me back. And when I answered, he said he had called me back by mistake after hitting the wrong button and hung up. So we weren't able to get comment from him.
So no, I did not mean to talk to the reporter that's been asking questions. All right, well, so what's next in this case?
Well, the judge is going to hold a mini trial, essentially, on whether Alderman Gardner should pay the people who he blocked on Facebook damages. Now, I spoke with Pete Sosnicka, who was one of the people who sued Alderman Gardner. He's hoping the judge will order the alderman to cover his attorney fees, which he says are not insignificant.
And as you know, this is not the only legal challenge Alderman Gardner is facing. There's a number of fronts that he's battling. So what are the other cases here?
Well, you and I reported 2 years ago that Alderman Gardner was under FBI investigation for pay-to-pay politics. He has not been charged in that case. But in a few weeks, the Chicago Board of Ethics will decide whether he should be fined for violating the city's ethics ordinance by directing city employees to issue tickets to Pete Sosnicka, same guy, for having weeds in his yard when he had a rain garden in his yard. And the Inspector General ruled that that action was retaliatory, again, because of Pete Sosnicka's criticism of Alderman Gardner.
It certainly sounds like classic retaliation. This alderman always in hot water, but recently reelected.
Yes, he just won re-election, so he is in that seat for at least another 4 years.
All right, Heather Sharon, thanks very much. We'll both be following this, and you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. Up next, the local impact of the auto worker strike, so please stay with us.
Joe Biden makes history today, becoming the first sitting president to appear on a picket line. The president joined striking auto workers in Michigan today in a sign of support.
Unions built the middle class. That's a fact. So let's keep going. You deserve what you've earned, and you've earned a hell of a lot more than you're getting paid now. Thank you very much.
Thousands of United Auto workers have been striking against the big three auto companies, General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, including employees in the Chicago area. Joining us now to talk about the local impact of the strike are Dave Sloan, co-president of the Chicago Automobile Trade Association, which represents auto dealers, and Chris Penna, president of the UAW Local 551, which represents Ford Motor Company workers at the Chicago Assembly Plant in the South Side. We invited representatives from Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis to join the conversation, but none have accepted our invitation. Dave and Chris, thanks to the both of you for joining us. Chris, let's start with you, please. As we just saw, the president visiting UAW members on the picket lines. How does that impact striking workers?
Well, Brandis, thanks for having me, first and foremost. The way that Joe Biden, impacts the strikers on the line is it's a morale booster, and it gives us hope that we'll be reaching a tentative agreement a lot faster with Ford Motor Company.
Dave Sloan, you represent dealers. Do you think that the president's move today signals that auto manufacturers should make a deal?
Well, I know the president has seemed to come out sort of on both sides of the issue, not surprising, that he wants to make sure it's a competitive deal so that they can ensure the big three's long-term survival, and certainly that the auto workers are paid fairly.
Chris Penna, remind us, what are you all asking for and why?
Well, we're asking for our cost of living allowance back that we gave up during the recession era, higher wages, which match the inflation rate, and pensions for all. We've seen good contracts from the UAW as of this year, with John Deere being able to establish pensions for their newer members at John Deere, and we expect the same with Ford Motor Company.
Dave, have dealers and mechanics started to feel the effects of this strike?
They're concerned about it if it lasts very much longer. The move last week by the UAW to strike the parts distribution warehouses at Stellantis and General Motors certainly means that the strike will be felt sooner, because the service operations of the dealerships will be impacted. I've talked to a number of dealers, though, who said that they were preparing for this over the last few months and have stockpiled parts in their service operations.
So what does that mean then for car owners if I need some parts?
Sure. So,
in 3
if I'm
months?
going in for service, are the parts that I need for my service appointment there to be used? So usually, right now we're in okay shape, but again, if it goes on much longer, might be trouble.
Chris, how close would you say Ford is to reaching a deal?
Well, hopefully they'll reach a deal this week. We're looking towards a cost of living allowance, which Ford agreed upon already, to giving that back. The economic issues with wages and pensions are the sticking point right now, but we look to hopefully come to an agreement sometime soon. The negotiators in Detroit are diligently at the table 24 hours with the company, and hopefully they can come to a tentative agreement by Friday, but that's yet to be determined.
So, Chris, if you ratify a deal, could it mean that you could possibly be back to work, or those folks could possibly be back to work while UAW members at GM and Stellantis could still be on the picket lines? What would that mean?
Yeah, so Local 900, which builds the Bronco up in Michigan, that's the only plant in the Ford facility right now, the assembly plant that's out on strike. The rest are the parts plants for GM and Stellantis, and 2 assembly plants for GM and Stellantis. At Chicago Assembly Plant, where we build the Explorer, Lincoln Aviator, and police units, we're continuing to work, but we are mobilized, organized, and ready to strike if need be, if we get the direction from Detroit. But if we reach a TA, a tentative agreement, then we'll be back at, all plants will be operational again, and we'll keep building the vehicles that drive the American economy.
With that said, it sounds like UAW is prepared to expand to other facilities if needed.
Yes, if there's not a tentative agreement reached, more plants are mobilized and ready to go. We're ready to strike. Our dignity has been taken away slowly. We've had our rights eroded, and now is our time to strike. We gave up a lot during the recession era with the cost of living allowance and bringing in a tiered system, which caused a lot of division amongst the workers. You have new workers that actually get paid half as much as some of the legacy employees, and they're doing the same job, and it's just not right. We want an even playing field when it comes to the auto workers. This is a historic contract that we're asking for. We want a fair contract, but we also want to set the standard for all working class across the U.S. It's not just about the auto workers. It's about the whole economy and bringing it up to the working class and making products made in America that will stimulate our economy.
Dave?
There's a reckoning going on right now. The move to electric vehicles, the investment by the manufacturers, it's upwards of $100 billion that the manufacturers have put into new plants, battery plants. It's a huge investment. And so that's where all the profits are going. They're going back into the plants, investing in this big changeover. And they have to stay competitive with the non-union EV startups like Tesla and Rivian, and some of the foreign automakers' plants down south. So it's all about long-term competitiveness.
Down south in right-to-work states, for example, where workers are not unionized.
Yeah.
Dave? I'm sorry, Chris?
Dave, to that point, I would say that, Dave, to your point, I would say that, government subsidies help out the auto industry a lot, and that's on the backs of the taxpayers that are helping these auto industries. In the recession era, the auto workers for Ford Motor Company gave up a cost of living allowance and other concessions so that the company could thrive and maintain operating in the U.S. It was GM and Chrysler at the time that took those bailout money from the public. The taxpayers are what paid for the GM and Chrysler, which is now Stellantis, to stay afloat. Ford didn't do that.
Doesn't
It was the
change.
auto
That
workers.
doesn't change the situation right now, where the investment going into the EVs. So that's where we are. And look at the Rivian plant down in Bloomington Normal, EV startup, non-union plant. I'm surprised in a union-friendly state like Illinois that the UAW hasn't knocked on the door of Rivian. A great place for you guys to grow.
Dave, I want to talk a little bit about the. Sorry, Chris, I just wanted to get a little bit to the concerns that dealers might have about inventory and price hikes if this strike is prolonged, because then that is where it hits the consumer if prices should spike again.
Yeah, certainly we saw that during during COVID and the supply chain shortage. Obviously, that was across the board. So the impact here will be less because it's just GM, Ford, and Stellantis. But we could see some of those prices going up. Right now, they also have the model year changing over, so the dealers are clearing out those 23s on their lots with the 24s coming in.
Okay, so obviously something that everybody at this table will be keeping an eye on. That's where we have to leave it. Chris Penna and Dave Sloan, thanks to you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, exploring the great outdoors with the host of the PBS series America Outdoors. But first, a look at the weather. America is full of wild spaces that have shaped and been shaped by the country's history. In the PBS series America Outdoors, host Baratunde Thurston explores our country's relationship to its natural places. In its second season premiere episode, Thurston goes to church on the Swanee River. Here's a look.
Is your congregation, your human congregation, are they used to this now? Do they look forward to it? Or like, oh, Reverend's taking us back out to the swamp again. Here we go.
No, they look so forward to it. Yeah. We've gotten so many people that come out and really enjoy these services. We've been doing it for almost 3 years now.
What is the difference in terms of your experience of the sermon? How does it feel different to do it outside versus inside?
Well, definitely, I feel like outside is more of a spiritual connection to nature itself, trying to get back to what God intended. There's times where you can feel like you're isolated because you're only inside. So coming back, it's like reconnecting.
And joining us is the show's host, Baratunde Thurston, who is also a writer, comedian, and podcast host. Baratunde, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, Brandis. Thanks for having me. Hello, WTTW, Chicagoland.
That's us. That's us. So that scene with the congregation in the opening of that episode, they're singing the Negro spiritual, Wade in the Water, overlooking the Okefenokee Swamp. Now, I grew up in Mississippi and in the church as well, and this is not something that most of us see, certainly not on a travel show. What did visiting that service teach you about America?
Yo, it taught me that the critters and the wildlife and the plant life are as much a part of this country as the people. It taught me that some of our greatest heroes and climate heroes in particular are very unsung, poor Black folk in the southeast of this country. And it taught me that swamps can be beautiful, beautiful places. I think of a swamp as something that's negative. You want to drain the swamp. There's monsters lurking in the swamp. And Okefenokee is a magical, beautiful place, doing a lot of work to help preserve what remains of our stable climate. So there's layers to that swamp and to my visit there, especially with the Reverend and his congregation.
And you visit more than one swamp as well. Let's talk about the name America Outdoors, because, for the purposes of this show, what qualifies as outdoors? Because in the first season, you visit the LA River, which is not technically a river, so the definition isn't strictly natural.
So as an LA resident, new though I am, I must defend my area. The LA River is, in fact, a river. It is navigable. I kayaked it. I fly fished on it. I caught a big slimy but very large, beautiful carp. So don't be talking trash about my trash-filled river. That's number one.
My apologies to the river.
Thank you. Thank you. So what qualifies as outdoors is a really good question. Anything outside your door. We did a whole episode on LA in our first season, and we focused on backyard gardening. We looked at hiking within the city limits and within the county limits. So you can have something in your windowsill and you're growing herbs or flowers or feeding birds, and that's your way of connecting with the outdoors. That is just as valid as the time I spent in Utah in Big Cottonwood Canyon, rock climbing with the legendary rock climber Nikki Smith, which is coming up on a soon-to-air episode for the Utah episode. Everything in between those 2 points is outdoors. If it involves going outside your door or your flap, or if you still live in the 70s, those little bead doorways, whatever it is that separates inside from the outside, you step outside. The show is about you and your connection with that world outside.
Outdoors you are. Your show makes me think of this other couple, a Chicago couple, and on social media they call themselves Black People Outside, and they're always doing something outside, whether it's, hiking, and they have to identify as Black people outside because we all know there's a complicated relationship that Black Americans have with whatever outside is. So do other marginalized people. Tell us about that complicated relationship that we have with the outdoors.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. For some of us, the outside was a forced labor camp. For some, it's a site of torture and death and pain. For some, it is a sign of a site of injury and a physical brokenness. People who have fallen off of things and injured themselves doing beautiful outdoor activities. And so we don't shy away from that in this show. This is largely a celebration. There is much to celebrate about the human connection to nature within this country and honestly beyond. But the idea of some acknowledging the hurt that has happened in the outdoors, the separation that we've experienced through commerce and capitalism, but also through policy, through redlining, through all sorts of discriminatory practices, not just on the racial front, but gender and certainly with abilities. I spent some time traveling this country. I've gone whitewater rafting with a paralyzed man, mountain biking with another paralyzed American. Folks are capable of a lot more when we open up those doors to the outside and make sure they're accessible to all, so we can all appreciate that connection and preserve this planet, which is my favorite planet to live on.
My favorite planet too. All of that said, what does it mean to you as a Black man hosting this kind of show?
It's fun. I mean, it is. I grew up in DC. I grew up in Chocolate City, and I grew up with access to the outdoors. My mother was a Sierra Club member. She was always taking me and my friends on bike trips and camping trips, in part to get us out of the hood situation and the threats from cops or gang members or what have you that was going on. So it was a nice escape. And it was bonding, and it was fun. You could play tag and you scrape your knees and all the things that kids love to do. So for me to be somewhat grown now, to be able to play in the outdoors and make this show brings me back to that childhood. To be a Black person doing it is a constant reminder that we have a right to these places, that as much as there is pain and torture tied up with our experience on this land, there is also liberation and joy and healing. And we brought a lot of a natural connection to this place when we were brought here. And so to tap into some of that affirmative connection that we have and get through some of the traumatic connection, it's been a personally beautiful and healing experience for me.
Okay, and Baratunde, we should also mention, we know that you're receiving the Distinguished Environmental Leadership Award by the Brushwood Center in Lake County on September 29th. Congrats to you on your work. We're looking forward to season 2. Baratunde Thurston, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I want to thank the Brushwood Center. Thank you, Chicago. I haven't been to y'all space in a while. There's a lot of beautiful outdoor things going on around the Little Calumet River. So I just want to shout out, the folks who are working to improve outdoor access and restore that human-nature connection all across this country and across the world. Thank you for having me.
Well, you're due for a visit. We look forward to seeing you then.
All right.
And we're back to wrap things up right after this. And that is our show for this Tuesday night. Don't forget to stay connected with us by signing up for our daily briefing. And you can get Chicago Tonight streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and our website, WTTW.com/news. You can also get the show via podcast and the PBS video app. And join us tomorrow night at 5:30 and 10. Police Superintendent nominee Larry Snelling faces city council members in his final confirmation vote. And we introduce you to the only Chicago recipient of the Midwest Award for Artists with Disabilities. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a Chicago personal injury and wrongful death firm whose attorneys embrace a culture of philanthropy and service by volunteering their time, expertise, and guidance to help others in the greater Chicago community.